It's emerged tonight that Britain's surveillance post at GCHQ has been using information covertly gathered by the Americans from some of the biggest internet sites to compile intelligence reports, according to leaked documents. Tonight, President Obama assured Americans that nobody is listening to the content of your phone calls, but the revelations have sparked fears about privacy on both sides of the Atlantic. With our first report tonight, our Washington correspondent, Matt Fry.
What is the right balance between liberty and security? This question is as old as the American Republic itself. It became more acute after 9/11 and far more complicated with the widespread use of computers and cell phones. This week it burst into the open, and this morning the president had to go on the defensive.
When it comes to telephone calls, nobody is listening to your telephone calls. Now, with respect to the internet and emails, this does not apply to U.S. citizens, and it does not apply to people living in the United States.
But it does apply to people in Britain, for instance. There have been almost 200 intelligence reports generated by this program from the UK last year alone. GCHQ, Britain's domestic spying agency, working with the Americans by circumventing British law. The program is called PRISM, and it started under President Bush here in the National Security Agency, the world's biggest eavesdropping organization. Since 2007, the NSA has been accessing the data from household names like Google, Facebook and Apple to trawl the internet for anything suspicious that could point to a terrorist threat. That, by the way, was also the year that candidate Barack Obama went on the offensive against domestic spying.
I will provide our intelligence and law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to track and take out the terrorists without undermining our Constitution and our freedom. No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient. That is not who we are.
But that, it turns out, is who he has become, his critics say. This administration not only inherited PRISM from George W. Bush, it enhanced it. Apart from trawling the internet, the NSA has also been finding out which phone numbers Americans have called, how often and for how long. Not the contents of the actual call, but everything else. And potentially from anyone and everyone in this country. Now listen to this Q&A session with America's most senior intelligence officer from March.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
The administration argues that the eavesdropping has already foiled some terrorist plots and leaves America safer. But without specifics, the country may not be convinced that this mass infringement of privacy is a price worth paying. And there are plenty of red faces in Washington tonight, and perhaps the reddest of them all belongs to that famous constitutional lawyer, otherwise known as Barack Obama. How does he explain to a public, having campaigned on transparency and openness of government and accountability, that this spying program was not just inherited from George W. Bush, but was in fact bolstered, enhanced? He's going to find that extremely difficult, and there'll be more and more questions, not just from his own Democrats, but also from Republicans, who are normally in favor of enhanced national security in the following days. For instance, the author of the famous Patriot Act, under which this sort of spying was allowed, a man called Jim Sensenbrenner, a Republican from Wisconsin, said yesterday that this went far beyond anything that he himself, a national security hawk, had envisaged. And of course, then there are the red faces amongst in Silicon Valley. The internet companies like Yahoo, like Google, like Apple, like Facebook have all said that they either didn't know about PRISM, the program, or they didn't cooperate with the administration. So how exactly did the administration access this material? Were they hacking these famous companies? Were they doing so without the companies knowing it? Or are the companies perhaps not telling the entire truth? There are so many questions here, and this is so important because it gets to the very heart of what this republic is about, the balance between liberty and security.
Thanks, Matt.